Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and welcome to our weekly Westchester Update. This is Monday, April 10th, and we're very happy to be able to give you an idea of some of the major issues that are happening here in Westchester County. I'm going to be joined in a few minutes by the chair of the Westchester County Board of Legislators, the Honorable Catherine Borgia, who's going to talk about some legislative initiatives that have been taken under her leadership by the Board of Legislators. Then we'll be joined a few minutes after that by the head of our Information Technology Department, our either a CIO or Commissioner of IT, we call her a czar or whatever we want to call her, Marguerite Byrne, who is going to give us an update on an important rollout of what we're doing to change the county's website and our email access and information. That's very important, and she'll be able to give us a guideline on that. And we'll touch on some of the other issues of what's happening, give you a quick update on the state budget, what's happening in our electoral process, Con Edison rate hike, which is being asked for by Con Edison, what's happening with Indian Point with the Holtec decommissioning, major issue of public policy there, and then, of course, an update on what we're doing with some of our parks. This is the month of April, and this is Earth Month, and before the month is over, we intend to have some announcements on a variety of different levels that show you our commitment as an administration in concert with the Board of Legislators on environmental policy. So we'll touch on that a little bit, too, as we're here together. So we'll start right off with our good friend Catherine Borgia. Catherine is the chair of the Westchester County Board of Legislators. She has served 6 terms as a member of the Board of Legislators, and she had previous service as the town supervisor of the town of Ossining, village trustee in the village of Ossining. She has served as a chief aide to Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff, so she's had experience at the state level, the village level, the county level, and the town level, so it's a great background in local government. And under her leadership in the Board of Legislators over the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, she has led the board in a number of different initiatives, and there's some of those that she's going to touch on today. So let me introduce my friend and the leader of the legislative branch of this government, the Honorable Catherine Borgia. Catherine, thank you for joining us today for the update.
Thank you, George. Thanks. So it is Earth Month, and one of the most recent pieces of legislation that the Board of Legislators has worked on and has passed that we're very proud of is reducing the use of single-access plastics. This was one of those pieces of legislation that made so much sense that we actually didn't have any opposition to it. We assumed that some of the places that do takeout or other kinds of businesses might object to this bill, which requires that you ask for single-use plastic. Many of you have had the experience, I know that I have, where you do a takeout order for something that you're having delivered to your home and you intend to use your own silverware and your own plates and your own condiments, and yet your soup from the Chinese restaurant comes with a bag full of stuff that you don't need and don't want, and that winds up in the landfill. So we were very pleased under the initiative of Legislator Erica Pierce and Vice Chair Nancy Barr to pass this piece of legislation right in time for Earth Month. I also wanted to talk about another piece of legislation that we've worked in very close collaboration with the administration on, as well as many advocates, and that is providing in Westchester County access to counsel for people who are facing eviction and other landlord-tenant disputes. We note, we've been working on this legislation for a while, and we've had the opportunity to go to, prior to the pandemic and then post-pandemic, several local courts where landlord-tenant disputes are being adjudicated. And we see that in Westchester County and really all over New York State, people who are unrepresented often fare worse than people who are represented, and it's usually the landlords who are represented. So we're very proud of the work that we've done on this piece of legislation. We are planning to have a public hearing this month and likely vote it out early next May, and that will start us creating, working closely with the administration, an office that will put together plans to make sure that tenants in Westchester County have the same legal rights and have the same chance of having a legal dispute settled in their favor as landlords do. So it's really a leveling the playing field kind of thing. We hope that this piece of legislation will actually be a model for other municipalities, counties, and possibly other states as well. Wanted to mention something that I know, or 3 things that I know George is also going to talk about. The first being the resolution on Con Ed. George is going to talk a little bit more, in a little bit more detail about the Con Ed rate hike. Westchester, the county legislature passed a resolution saying we firmly oppose any rate hike, especially because we know that Con Edison acts as a monopoly and is using some of this money to create infrastructure that will further our use of fossil fuels, which is against the goals of New York State to be energy independent in the next by 2050. So we really oppose this rate hike. We know that our residents can't afford this. We've seen tremendous increase in the cost of energy. We think that Con Ed should reevaluate, not invest money in old technology, and make sure that savings get passed along to our consumers who are really hurting right now. I'd like to ask George to come back and talk a little bit about Holtec. He mentioned it in his introduction. Holtec is the company that has been authorized to do the decommissioning at Indian Point. There's a couple of unique things about the Indian Point power plant. First of all, they are in the most densely populated area of the United States, frankly. And we know that over the course of the types of ownership, actually Con Ed owned one of the plants for a while, that there have often been concerns because of the density of the residents around this area. Holtec is a company that, there's very few companies that do decommissioning. They are a company that has done decommissionings around the country, but not always without controversy and difficulty. I sit on the state decommissioning board, and George often sends a representative to that board, and I know is planning to join us in April. And we learned that although there's several ways for the pool that holds the spent fuel rods to be, for that water to be disposed of, Holtec has decided to do the cheapest, no surprise, option, which is to dump it into the Hudson River. That was intended to happen later on in this year. We just recently learned, though, that they want to accelerate that and dump this water without the tests that we asked for, without the safeguards that we asked for, without considering other options, into the Hudson River next month in May. So we are really urging people to make your voices known. As you know, the Hudson is an estuary at the area where Indian Point is. It's a river that flows both ways, famously made famous in song as the river that flows both ways. And we can't afford to make an environmental mistake that will impact this river for generations and generations. So we are partnering here in the county with our partners at the state level, and I'm asking you to please make your voice known by sending me an email at my Westchester County email address, which you can get through our website, and is also cxb9@westchestergov.com. For now, Marguerite, right? Soon it will be different, but for now, that's my email address. And the only way to stop this, in my opinion, is by making our voice loud. We need to make sure that this is the best decommissioning that we have for nuclear power plants around the country. It's the most significant in terms of the potential for environmental impact, and also it should be a model for how this gets done so that all the other 100+ nuclear power plants that will close one day because they are physical plants have a model for how to do it the best possible way. George, would you like to jump in on that?
I think it's important to understand that in certain issues that there's an agreement that is both bipartisan between representatives of both the Democratic and the Republican parties, and there are issues that have agreement between the legislative branch and the executive branch. You don't often see the head of the executive branch, the head of the legislative branch talking together in a certain context. We have a couple of issues that Catherine has pointed out, and the board has shown leadership on some of these issues. So their resolution relative to this, I think, is very important. We're going to be having a press conference at some point in time very quickly. We had to move up the time because of their planned change in times. Alongside of County Executive Ed Day, County Executive Steve Newhouse and County Executive Kevin Byrne from respectively Rockland, Orange, and Putnam counties. All three happen to be Republicans. I happen to be a Democrat, but we are in agreement that Holtec's planned release of this polluted radioactive water into the Hudson River is objectionable to us. And I think it's important to understand, I'll go back to what Catherine just said a second ago. There are many different strategies to deal with the problem of having radioactive water. Holtec, as a corporation, goes to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in Washington, D.C. for approvals. But that's not enough. This is a major matter of public policy. There isn't the least little bill that we might want to do at our level of government requires both the legislature to go through a process, public hearing, public input, and not just public input, 2 o'clock in the afternoon for whoever can come, but times that's convenient for the public to interact with, as well as having interaction with those who are professionals in there to get professional input. And I think what's been derelict by Holtec in this case is to understand that the decision to release radioactive water into the Hudson River is not a matter to be dealt with like this. It's not just what's the most convenient way, what's the least expensive way. You need to analyze publicly all of the different options that are before you. If you want to cost it out so we can understand what the price differences are, then you need to do that. But there has to be a consensus, not just of what the NRC will approve, but what the people of Westchester County, Putnam County, Dutchess County, Orange County, Rockland County believe is the right public policy. If you don't have that, then you don't really have government of the people. You're really excluding the populace on a decision like this. Let me add one other thing, too. There is a tendency when we're into issues of great technology, issues that involve science, issues that involve engineering, where there's a general sense that those of us who are generalists do not really know what's going on, or you really have to let the engineers, you have to let the professionals make the final decision. And there's an element of that in this decision. Those people who are experienced in the nuclear industry sort of know better what to do, and those of us who are not part of that shouldn't be part of it. We put up a couple of years ago over at the Rising on the Kensico Dam a wall. And on that wall, we are memorializing those people from Westchester County who, in the aftermath of 9/11, worked on the pile and did what was necessary to clear out that area to get it back to us being able to put up the Freedom Tower and resume our normal lives. The people whose names are on that wall died from 9/11 related illnesses. At the time, the people who were scientific experts, the people who were at the top level of the federal government, they said it was okay to go back there. It wasn't okay. There are people who lost years of life, people who died in their 50s, died in their 40s, well before their proper term of life. And they were told by authorities that it was okay. Well, it wasn't okay. So I'm not willing to accept somebody telling me, well, it's okay that we can put radioactive water in there. You're going to have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And the proving of it is not to announce, oh, we're going to do it in August. No, we're going to do it in May. That's not acceptable. And I think the citizens of this county and the other counties feel strongly that there has to be a public case made about what is the right policy, not just what is the least expensive policy to deal with. And in this society, where we have divisions based on political affiliation and ideology, where we have divisions because one person's an executive, the other person's a legislature, we have unanimity. We have unanimity that this decision is being rushed and it's looking to get federal support for something for which there is no popular support for. So Catherine's leadership on the Board of Legislators, the things we're trying to do within the executive branch, we think is very essential in doing those things. Some of the other initiatives, and Catherine's going to talk about another piece of legislation, what we've been able to do in this county government is we've been able to talk about these ideas before we get to the final point of here's a bill, here's how it passes, and then, of course, the executive sign it. We've had, in recent memory, at least one issue that there wasn't consensus on, but that's 1 out of 5 years. We seek to find consensus where we can find it, because most people don't really care about the inner workings of politics. They care about the end result. Do we accomplish the mission at the end of the day? And although the board has some members of what would be the minority party, there was a time before I was chairman of the board that I was the minority leader of the board. So I know what it's like to be in a political minority and be excluded from the decision process. So as much as we can, we try to include people of both political sides of the aisle. If there's an ideology that divides us, then so be it. The voters have spoken and created a certain structure of government today. But that doesn't mean the voices are silenced. And when we get to unanimity, there's something there to be paid attention to. Why don't you continue with what you wanted to cover?
Sure. Just one further point on the decommissioning. Decommissioning is paid for by the decommissioning fund, which is money that has been paid for by consumers through your energy bills over the course of the 50 years since we've had, or I guess 70 years now since we've had nuclear power plants. So this is your money. This is taxpayer money, ratepayer money that they are seeking to use and make a profit on during the decommissioning. So I think it's everyone has a stake in this. It's an environmental stake, it's an economic stake, and as George said, when there's so much unanimity, we do have our two federal senators, Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer, also asked Holtec to reconsider this rush to do this dumping into the Hudson River. So there's a lot of political will, but the real political will comes from individuals. So we really are asking everyone to get involved in doing this. The final piece of legislation I want to talk about also involves work with the administration, and that is the cameras on school bus stop signs. We know that this is a big problem. Many of us in the legislature have heard from our constituents, and the executive branch has heard from a lot of people saying that there's traffic safety issues with cars passing stop school buses. This is a pilot program that we'll see if having cameras on the school arm, that when the stop sign comes out, you're supposed to stop well back because you don't know which way children are going when they get off that bus, to help provide additional safety for our students and for their families by doing this pilot program. I'm going to turn this over to George too, because this is one that we've also worked together on.
Well, and what's interesting is that the state legislation that thought that it was a good idea to put cameras on the arms when you come behind a school bus and the flashing red lights are on and the stop arm comes out, that there be a camera on it to then photograph whatever cars determine that it's more important for them to pass the school bus than to wait until all the children are off and on, and then the arm comes in and then it goes forward. This piece of legislation existed when I was a member of the state legislature. In passing it, it requires an opt-in by various levels of government. And at the outset, it's important to understand that not everybody in Westchester County has school buses that bring their school children to school. The major urban districts, the cities of Yonkers, White Plains, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, the city of Rye, do not have a school bus structure for transportation purposes. We, in fact, have beeline buses that become the means to get to schools in those urbanized districts. We saw that there was a demand to do this in some of the northern Westchester communities. And in northern Westchester communities, you have roads that extend from point A to point B without necessarily having a parallel road next to it. When you go into the more densely populated parts of southern Westchester County, you have grid structures where this street might be the street that the school bus is on, and there are parallel streets that passenger traffic can take and not interact with the school buses. So the demand for this was not at the outset universal. It was targeted in a couple of different areas. Nonetheless, while the local governments could have opted in those communities, we made the decision to look at opting in on a countywide basis and then try to see how this will work. We think the bottom line is this. As with any enforcement mechanism, we'll catch the people who are breaking the law right now. But the intent is to make that potential being capture and cost for the ticket so significant that you just won't do the infraction. We don't want the infraction done. We'd be just as happy as if we never had to write one ticket for a car passing a school bus. Just don't pass the school bus. We know that your urgency, I have the same problem. I have to get someplace and up behind a school bus. This is going to take me a long time, and I might get frustrated. But the bottom line is that we want there to be the safety of the school children. And we know that when children are on a school bus, they're not yet at an adult level where they can make rational decisions when they're in an active street. And you, the driver, might calculate that a person might do a certain thing. Well, that's based on an adult assessment of, do I cross the street now or not? Kids don't make those assessments, and they may fool around and just be right out in the middle of the street. So this is why this bill is important. We compliment the legislature for analyzing it. I want to give particular credit to Legislator Vedat Gashi, Legislator Colin Smith, and Legislator Borgia herself. Their districts have raised questions about this, and they've taken leadership on this. And obviously, while it is being discussed in the legislature, when it comes to passage, I would expect to sign it into law, and we would expect to have it in place. And so I want to thank Chair Catherine Borgia. We had a press conference a week to 10 days ago where we signed into law truthful disclosure bill, and I said at the time with that and also with the single-purpose plastic bill that we look forward to putting rational pieces of legislation into place. The truthful disclosure law doesn't cost anybody a dime. Maybe the candidate has to sit down and type out a resume. And the plastic law was one that the businesses themselves thought was a good idea, and they helped address a problem, as now does the bus arm one. So we're very happy to work cooperatively cooperatively. And I know this is not the norm. You have quite a bit of conflict in Washington and a fair bit of conflict in New York State right now, where the executive and the legislative branch can't seem to get along. But I think we're doing well here. And let me point out that not only do we have the leadership of Catherine Borgia as chair, Nancy Barr as vice chair, Chris Johnson is the majority leader, and Margaret Kunzio is the minority leader, and her number two, Jim Nolan. We find common ground where we can find it. Doesn't mean we agree on everything, but it does mean we try to find common ground and we try to move forward. I think these are good examples of it. So, Madam Chair, thank you for being with us today to highlight some of these public policy issues. Let me mention what's happening in the state before I bring up our next speaker. We are now in extra innings. In the month of April, we're 10 days past the date, the April 1st date, in which the New York State budget needs to have been adopted. And the process is the Assembly and the Senate adopt a series of bills. It's 11 separate bills that comprise the state budget in different categories of public policy. When all of those bills are passed by the Assembly and in the exact same form passed by the Assembly, then the legislature has completed the budget process and they send the budget back to the governor for the governor's signature. The governor also has, as I have at the county level, line item veto potential. I have not had to use it over the course of my 5 budgets as a county executive, because what happens before the budget gets passed is you discuss and negotiate things and you come to some agreement about this should be in, this shouldn't be in, or I'll accept this if you do this. And it's the natural negotiation. These things go on in your household between husbands and wives, between parents and children, and it's the same thing that happens at the larger level. But they are at an impasse as we speak today at this time of the day. I believe they have just passed an extender, which extends the authority for the state to continue to operate for the next week. They passed an extender a week ago. This allows for basic services to be maintained, for payroll to be met. At some point in time, you can't operate on perpetual extenders. You're going to have a full budget adopted. There are quite a number of issues that apparently divide the legislature and the governor. From a Westchester County standpoint, we are watching the resolution of the housing compact with great interest. I've expressed my position on it already. I think it's important that we work to add housing units in general, and certainly affordable housing units. I do not like the idea that communities are being mandated to accept a certain amount of density at a rail station. Not all rail stations are alike. Some warrant the density, some do not. It depends on the topography. And then also, I do not favor the state being able to override local zoning. We have found in Westchester County, we've made major improvements in the amount of affordable housing we've done. We're not where we need to be yet, but we've made major improvements, and we've done it cooperatively. We've worked with town supervisors of both political parties, city mayors of both political parties to try to work out Project A, Project B, and we've been able to advance them. And you can see examples of it all over the county right now. There's a project going up in Peekskill, right off of Main Street, between Main Street and South Street, that represents a cooperative effort. There's projects going on right now in Yonkers, in White Plains, in New Rochelle, that all represent different affordable housing efforts. And then outside of affordability, there's a major housing complex in the old GM site, Sleepy Hollow, Tarrytown. There's a campus full of new housing going up in Harrison on the SUNY Purchase campus. Pleasantville, we're working on a small building in downtown Pleasantville, converting it from an office space to housing, but moderate, 14 units, not 140 units. So there's efforts going on all over the place. I have objected very vigorously to the press, which has described in some cases, generally press based out of New York City, that the suburbs are hostile. The suburbs are NIMBY. The suburbs are racist. I pushed back on those things because none of those are true statements in Westchester County. But it is also true that people who live in a community have the right and I believe the obligation to make decisions about the environment that they live in. So to take that local power away from a village, a town, or a city, frankly, is insane. And if you're looking at trying to retain people in New York with housing, the fastest way to turn them off is to bring unwanted density into an area that can't support it. Because it's not just how many units are created, but you have to ask yourself, what's the sewage capacity? What's the water and the electric capacity? What is the capacity of schools to absorb the number of kids coming in? So it doesn't mean you can't do housing. We're doing housing now, but you have to do it thoughtfully, and you have to do it looking at all the different angles to it. We've been able to do that successfully over the last 5 years. So we'll see what happens in that major issue. issue at the state level. There are some issues that are very important to the county government, how the state intends to see additional compensation for lawyers who represent the indigent, and whether that full burden is going to be on the backs of county officials or will be shared by the state. That's an important financial issue to us. Whether or not the state will stop the proper flow through of money from the federal government to the county governments in New York State for operation of the Medicaid program. There was an intent of money to flow through, which the original executive proposal was not to make that happen, and that would be a major hit to our budget. We have a stable budget. We've been able to cut taxes for the last 4 years, invest in our infrastructure, and that becomes a problem if you're going to change the revenue structure that we have properly relied on. And there's some other issues that are out there. Certainly the bail issue is transfixed state decision makers. County has no direct public policy role on that. We operate a prison, whatever the rules are, what we have to follow from the state level, but that's been a highly controversial issue. And there are some other ones of some magnitude. Charter schools, having been a state legislator in both the Assembly and the Senate, when I was in those positions, I dealt with those issues straightforwardly. Now, in this role, my responsibility to the county is to work on the county element of these issues and to let our state legislators and the governor interact on them. So we hope that they'll have some closure on it, but we are watching it closely, and we want to let you know, and you'll hear from your various state legislators of what progress is being made or isn't being made. But as of today, here on April 10th, there's been an extender passed, which will extend the period of time for negotiations for another week. And of course, last week, we had religious holidays in all of our major faiths, so hopefully now as we come through that process, there'll be an ability to make some progress on the negotiations ahead. So next I'd like to get to our second guest who's with us here today, the CIO, Chief Information Officer of Westchester County. She heads our Department of Information Technology, is Marguerite Byrne. Marguerite has served, this is the second administration that she's worked for in this capacity. She is a consummate professional in an industry that is undergoing many changes, and for which all of us, the older you get, the more you have to accept change. We recognize now that to stay current, to stay effective and efficient in the way we spend money, and also to protect against cyber criminality, that we need now to make a major change in the way we project contact with the county through our domain name and how that's played out through our website. So Marguerite Byrne will give us an idea of what the challenges are ahead, and we're very happy to have her professionalism help guide us through the process. Marguerite Byrne, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you.
Well, we all know about cybercrime and cybersecurity, and the federal government, through the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, Department of Homeland Security, is encouraging all governments to register with the .gov extension on their email. So Westchester County is changing its email address to westchestercountyny.gov. The naming convention is dictated to us, so Westchester's, who we are, that's our unique name. County has to be included if you're either county or parish, and then our state, which is NY, and then .gov. So why .gov? .gov will be very difficult to impersonate. We are registered through Homeland Security. It is a secure site. You know, it's a trusted, vetted government site, and you should trust the information that comes through .gov. Both our email addresses will work for the time being, but we are moving all our email to .gov. .govs are easily recognizable, so whether it be westchestercounty.gov or newyorkstate.gov or whitehouse.gov, you know those sites have been vetted and are trusted sites. Only U.S. government sites, U.S. government agencies will have a .gov extension. So if it's somewhere else, you know it's not a legitimate site. And our name is unique to us. And there will be more to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, this changeover will involve lots of rebranding of things that you've seen. We have step and repeat right off to the side in this room, which repeats the Westchester westchestergov.com logo, which we've had now for somewhat over 20 years. And all of those things over time will be changed. We have the westchestergov.com on our letterhead. It's on our the side of our county vehicles. Those aren't quickly as easily changed when you have to repaint every vehicle. But the changeover is important. There'll be a transition that will allow for your communications with us to be in either form, and will still get to us. So there'll be a period of time of transition, and we intend to announce on an ongoing basis what the change is. It is a longer name, but as Marguerite said, it's consistent with other county governments which have similar names, Orange County, ny.gov, and all across New York State. So be prepared to see a bit of a change. It may not affect your world every day. It certainly is going to affect our world, but at the end of the day, we'll be more safe and secure, which is ultimately what we hope to accomplish by making it less likely that we can be impersonated, hacked with all the cybercrime that goes out there. And we want to thank Marguerite and her team for your professionalism in doing that. And we'll have more of exactly how this thing transitions in the days to come. Marguerite, thank you very much for your help. So let me mention a couple of other things that we've talked about. When Chair Borgia was here, we talked a little bit about the Indian Point issue. There will be a decommissioning board meeting on April 27th. I will be in attendance at that. We will have our direct comments directly to Holtec. The decision on what happens in the Indian Point situation is made at the federal level. It is not a county power. It is not a municipal government power. But as Catherine said, we need to have our voices very clear about opposing the dumping of radioactive water into the Hudson River. And we really need to have a public dialogue about the different options that exist and how best to handle that. But the April 27th meeting is upcoming, and that is going to be a major issue. And then, as we've talked about with the decision on the Con Edison rate increases, I've submitted comments to the New York State Department of Public Service. It is the Public Service Commission that will make the decision on what to accept in terms of rates, and I think many state legislators, as well as those of us in other positions, are very concerned that we've seen a tremendous increase in our utility bills. And in fact, we made the effort to take sales tax off of those utility bills in December, January, and February, and now we find that there was a problem with implementation, and that Con Edison now will have to make some compensatory effort to help those people who should have gotten some of the discount, didn't get the discount. We did not accept the revenue for that, so therefore that should be passed on to the consumer in lower rates, and so we assume that's going to happen. But I think it's important to understand that Con Edison, as a public utility, should not be exempt from the same pressures that every public body does. Every business in the world would like to pass on its additional costs to the consumers and just say, look, it's the cost of doing business. We have to raise prices because the cost of us providing the services raise prices. But what you also see in companies are other decisions made that are not always the easiest decisions to make, but it involves your total staffing, it involves your compensation of your senior management and all management up and down the line. And you take certain severe actions, certain types of disciplines, because you want to reflect to your consumers that you're not just being blasé about, here's this cost goes up and we're going to pass it on to you, and hey, tough darts, you got to pay it more. And when you have a public monopoly in the utility, there's this sense that that is the default mindset. So we think that, and it's not just Con Edison, it's the other utilities around the state, that they have to understand the moment that we're in, that individuals have gotten hugely higher energy bills over the course of the last few months, even without the sales tax added on. And they're angry about it, and they don't just accept the fact that it's tough, we have to pay more. And every effort has to be made to streamline the effort of delivery of the service, because so much of this now isn't generated by Con Edison, it's generated by some other ESCO, and it is the delivery of the service and the cost of those things that matter. But there'll be more about that as we go forward, and we will look to our state legislators to take a particular form of leadership in all of these different issues. Moving to a little bit better topic for the moment, April is Earth Month. It was the month of the original Earth Day, April 22nd, 1970. I've told this story already of when I was a senior in high school. It's a long time ago. So in the month of April, we focus on our efforts to deal with the environment. We have coming up on April 20th annual ECHO Awards that we'll be giving out, honoring achievement in environmental stewardship for different organizations around Westchester County. We'll be doing that in a Facebook Live streamed event, which you'll be able to watch. We'll get you some information, but it's still a couple of weeks away from us. We also intend to have press conferences that will highlight the progress that we've made in electrifying our fleet and the efforts we're making for more EV charging stations around the county, the infrastructure now for electric vehicles to have a reliability of driving from point A to point B, and knowing that they can get an electric charge to keep them going is an essential part of the conversion of people from standard gasoline engines to electric vehicles. And so we're going to highlight some of those things. And we also are working on final touches on some legislation that we will be working with the Board of Legislators on that we think will be good environmental efforts. We've seen that across Westchester County there is a large consensus, well over 65% of the people that want to see prudent environmental actions taken, and that we saw that last year in the Environmental Bond Act vote, which was a very high percentage here in Westchester County, approaching 70% agreement that we need to spend money in order to reduce our carbon footprint in a reasonable, intelligent way. Some people disagree, but the vast majority of Westchester residents feel that these are important steps, and they will help us deal with climate change to the extent that we can. So there'll be some more announcements about that in the days to come. We look forward to that. Peter McCart, our Director of Sustainability, will be at the heart of these issues, and we'll be able to cover some of these things with you as we go forward. Different issue. Westchester has seen a number of large brush fires in recent days. The conditions right now are very dry. We've not had rain for a number of days, and the risk of fire in our parks and our wooded areas are very high. Now, many times you see this happening in the far western areas of the country, in California and in the Rocky Mountains, whenever there's insufficient rain. We usually don't have much of a problem getting rain in this part of the country, but in the last few days we've seen fires in Saxon Woods Park. That's in the White Plains, Scarsdale area. We've seen them in the towns of Cortland, Newcastle, and North Salem, and alongside I-684 in the town of North Castle. So there's currently a statewide outdoor burn ban in effect for the next month until May 14th. You cannot burn any debris, any firewood outdoors because of the risk of outdoor fires is highest at this time in the spring. The details for this can be found on the website of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Well, those also give you some basic reminders, common sense reminders, but things to deal with campfires and how you should limit the size, never leave a campfire unattended, make sure it's been fully extinguished before you leave it. You cannot burn any tree limbs or other organic debris during the burn ban that we've just talked about. You should be safely disposing any charcoal that you have in a grill or ashes from wood that may be burned in your fireplace. The way cigarettes may be discarded. Any of these things can start a brush fire, and because the conditions are ripe for that, the most simplest, careless action could trigger the beginnings of a serious fire. If you observe any smoke or small fire in any park or wooded area, do not assume that somebody hasn't reported it already. Call 911 immediately. Give them the information that they need so we can contain the fire as quickly as we can. This sort of leads into the fact that this week kicks off the National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, which is an important part of our Department of Emergency Services. These are the people that answer your calls when you call for help, and they get help to you in a prompt and an efficient manner. And we want to recognize the people that have been essential in that process. Our communications team operates from within our Emergency Operations Center in Valhalla, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 366 in a leap year. And it's known by the common shorthand 60 Control. 60 is the number of our county if you go alphabetical in New York State, with a 60th county out of 62 by alphabet. 60 Control. This was originally born in the basement of the Westchester County Parkway Police over 40 years ago. It's evolved into the primary fire and EMS dispatch services for the majority of those agencies in Westchester County. They handle all mutual aid requests, and they provide extensive support for the emergency medical dispatch, which arrives with information that tells them whether they need to have CPR professional at hand, Narcan administration, baby delivery, control of severe bleeding situations, a host of different things. This dispatch team has saved lives. They've saved lives amongst our neighbors over the years. They do so with pride and with professionalism. We want to publicly thank them, and we intend this month to recognize them as well for the terrific work that they've done. We'll mention a little bit about our parks. As we're now into the spring, we've got a much greater activity in our various parks. In the next upcoming week or 2 weeks, we have a pitch-in for parks, which allows you to come in and help, give a little elbow grease, a little shoulder to the wheel in a number of different locations. You can call us at 864-7322 for that kind of work. We'll spotlight Trailside Nature Museum up in Cross River off of Route 35 as one of those places. Saturday, April 22nd at Lenoir Preserve from 9 to 5. That's in Yonkers, right off of Broadway, North Broadway. They have an iNaturalist extravaganza. They'll be using sightings for some of our long-term projects and our research, and that's a Preserve Earth Day, the 22nd of September, the actual Earth Day as celebrated, and you can be helpful at Lenoir Preserve. The next day, we start our farmers market at Muscoot Farms in Somers on Route 100, just south of 35, 9:30 to 2:30, and it goes all the way until November. If you live in that part of the county or you want to take a beautiful Sunday drive, you can go to a Muscoot Farm, and that will support over 20 local vendors and the work that they do, which is really very terrific. We are approaching the beginning of Bicycle Sunday, which will start in May, but we're almost halfway through April. And the beginning of Bicycle Sunday is always great fun in the Bronx River Parkway, so I believe it will be the first Sunday in May. That will start. We already have our golf courses open. We have our nature trails stay open all year, our bike paths and our walking paths, the Bronx River Parkway Pathway, the North and South County Trailways on the western side of the county. We have a little pathway now that runs alongside Playland Parkway for about 1 mile in the Sound Shore area of the county. All of that is up and going. And if you get a copy of our spring calendar of events in our Parks Department, we'll be happy to send one to you. You can find it online. We try to distribute them in lots of different public locations to give you a full idea of April, May, and June parks activities. With each passing day, there's going to be more things, and you really should enjoy our parks. We have 55 parks, golf courses, pools, beaches, mountain bike trails. You're not going to catch me on one of them, but there are people who are big mountain bike enthusiasts, places to walk and hike. The nature centers have a variety of programs. Some of them involve little children. That's always great fun. There's still Playland Amusement Park, operated as an owned property of Westchester County. And as I've just mentioned, Muscoot Farms, Lasden, Arboretum, lots of different things in this county. And now, as we get to the spring season, which we're very happy to, we're going to see more of it. I want to mention also, just in the electoral process, those individuals who are running for election in November in local elections, which would be town, city, some villages, and county legislative seats. There are also some judicial positions up. They are going through now the last few stages of developing and submitting qualifying petitions. In order to run for office, you need to submit a certain number of signatures, depending on the jurisdiction. They need to be the members of a particular political party. There are 4 standing parties that have party normal various nominations to give out: the Republican, the Democratic, the Conservative, and the Working Families parties. Then an independent line can also be filed for. That will come in a little bit later. But right now, those various petitions are being submitted to the Board of Elections. They will be certified at some point in time. That will tell us in different positions whether there are 2 or more individuals competing for the party designation, party nomination for one of these positions. And we'll know when these petitions have been vetted properly, and then we'll know what will be coming up for the primary season. The next round of public elections that are coming are in the month of May. Tuesday in May, I believe it's the second Tuesday of the month, is school board elections. And outside of the city of Yonkers, every other municipality in Westchester County has elections for their local school boards, and this is the season in which candidates are announced on the ballot. School board elections are nonpartisan. In Westchester County, they do not represent a party affiliation. You might be a Republican, you might be a Democrat, but you run as an individual, and there is no official slating of different candidates. However, candidates may choose to campaign in a given district. That is always a possibility. But when you think about the impact of the school district to you, the resident, it's significant. You pay far more in school taxes than you pay for your town, city government, your village government, or your county government combined. And then, of course, the value of public education defines the community. If you have a strong school district, that is a major reason why people want to come and buy a home in your community. If you're in a home and you're going to sell it at some point in time, the value is tied in great part to the quality of the school district. So these issues are very much at hand, and also school budgets are voted on by the population. So the county government has no direct control over the schools. We get involved tangentially in a few issues, as we did during COVID, but by and large, it's a separate, independent level of government, and those elections are upcoming. So I encourage you, look at the League of Women Voters websites, take a look at the different people in the local print publications that you have that you might consult. Know who's running for the school board in your community, understand the different candidates, what their positions are on issues. Don't let it be a passage in the night, because this affects you in very significant areas. That's what's coming up in May. And then in June, there will be party primaries wherever there are competitors, as I've just described, in different positions. We don't know the lineup yet. That is yet to come. The new bill that we just passed, the Truthful Disclosure Law, goes into effect this year. So candidates for the county legislature, once they've been confirmed by the Board of Elections to being on the ballot, they will have to submit the form, as we've already described it more than once. And those forms will be available through the Board of Ethics, and you can certainly request them through FOIL, and you know that the press will, and the opposition will. So we'll know whether or not we have any other George Santoses lurking in the weeds, somebody who basically misrepresents what their educational background is, what their employment background is, what their military background is. But that will be in effect. And so where there are primaries, those primaries will be held in the month of June. Once we complete that process, then, and while there may be special elections for different purposes over the course of the next few months, there'll be some selection of regional judges in August by the different political parties. But by and large, you focus forward to November. People will call this an off-election year. You're not electing a governor, you're not electing a president, you're not electing a county executive, but you are electing mayors in the three largest communities in Westchester County: Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle. That'll be on the ballot. Our largest town, Greenburgh, and almost all the towns, if not all the towns, will have supervisor races this year. There's some village mayoralties that will be up, and then village board trustees, town council positions, county legislative positions. All 17 seats are on the ballot, and they may not carry the attention that a national campaign will, but this is not an off season in any way, shape, or form. You will decide what kind of city, what kind of village, what kind of town, and what kind of county you want to have this November in the election. There's plenty of time to worry about who's going to be the President of the United States in 2024, but first, keep an eye out on that. So in May, your school board elections; in June, whatever primaries may come up; and then in November, general elections for all of us. So that's what's on the docket as we look ahead. That'll do it for today's report. We appreciate you watching. Ken Jenkins is out of the county today. He will join us next week when we have our next updated report, which we're scheduling to do a week from today on April 17th. We hope there'll be some good news on the state budget. That would be nice. And we'll give you an update on a host of other issues. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful, safe day, and we'll see you soon.